The sky was black with smoke. The air stank of burning wood and fear. What would you do if your horse barn burned down? Your animals were killed, and the woman smiling at the flames was also the one who sent a wolf into your pasture. This isn't just a story about an HOA gone wild. It's about what happens when a retired demolition expert gets pushed too far by a woman who mistakes community standards for a crown. Stick around, because this isn't revenge. This is concrete justice poured cold, and trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. It started innocent enough. I retired early from 15 years of demolition work. Yeah, the kind with explosives, goggles, and a life insurance policy no one reads until it's too late. I used the payout from a minor accident, read a flying cinder block to the shin, to buy back my granddad's ranch in Pecan Hill. Just me, a beat-up rocking chair, and a wooden sign that read, "Not for sale," the kind of peaceful message that says namaste in rancher speak. Then came the BMW. Slow roll, tinted windows pulling into my gravel like it didn't know better. Out stepped a woman who looked like she sold scented candles at a markup of 800% and judged cows for having visible udders. Her name? Cheryl Burnbright, president of the Willow Ridge Homeowners Association and self-declared ambassador of manicured perfection. Picture a perfume commercial villain but with less subtlety and more paperwork, she called out. "Good afternoon. I'm Cheryl, president of the Willow Ridge HOA, I hollered back. "Can you read that sign by the fence? It's more expressive than me before coffee." But she didn't flinch. Cheryl smiled the way dentists do right before the drill hits nerve. "We'd love to welcome you into our community standards," she said, like I'd been drafted into a suburban cult. Now look, I'm not one to disrespect, but I spent over a decade blowing up skyscrapers. I've seen grown men cry into their hard hats because they forgot to mark the gas lines. Cheryl trying to intimidate me with bylaws was like bringing a butter knife to a backhoe fight. I told her, "Lady, this ranch has been in my family longer than your manicure's been in style. We don't join HOAs, we survive them." She didn't blink, just nodded like a mob boss offering me the last breadstick before stabbing me with a salad fork. "Mr. Tiller, refusal to cooperate can lead to uncomfortable circumstances." Now, I don't know what's more insulting, her tone or the fact that she called my cow pasture a visual disruption to the neighborhood's brand. "My cow's name is Muffin, Cheryl. She's been farting in that pasture longer than you've owned your fake Italian patio tiles." Anyway, I waved her off and went back to sanding my rocking chair, fully expecting that'd be the last of her, but Cheryl doesn't hear no. She hears, "Not yet." And that's when I knew I wasn't dealing with a homeowner. I was dealing with a clipboard queen on a suburban power trip with 0 brakes and unlimited pastel cardigans. I kept my cool for now, but something in her tone made me scratch my head and whisper, "Well now, ain't that suspiciously corporate?" You don't threaten a demo guy with uncomfortable circumstances unless you're ready to get educated in the art of controlled collapse. So I got a feeling she wasn't just here to say hi. I got a feeling she came with blueprints, a plan, and a PowerPoint titled, "How to Annex a Ranch Without Getting Sued." And I wasn't about to be slide number 2. If you were me, what would you do with this flower queen and her HOA spell book? Drop a comment, because she hasn't even started yet, and I ain't even gotten loud. Nothing says neighborly like blasting Enya at 6 a.m. to drown out the sound of cow flatulence. It was a Tuesday when I first noticed Cheryl dragging a folding table toward the fence, followed by a brigade of homeowners in pastel polos and sundresses that looked like Easter exploded. They were setting up for what she called a community enrichment mixer, but what it really was an assault on rural dignity. Champagne fountains, a harpist who played nothing but Coldplay, and lawn games no self-respecting person should play sober. Me, I responded like any good rancher under siege, with Goat Rodeo Wednesdays. I dressed up the goats, piped in circus music, and let Darlene, the sassiest of the herd, wear a sash that said, "Miss, not your property." I even set up bleachers. Nothing like watching livestock do laps while HOA folks sip mimosas and pretend it's not happening 40 feet away. One neighbor clutched her pearls so hard I thought she'd crack a rib. By Friday, Cheryl slipped a pink paper under my gate that read, "Community Violation, Unregistered Livestock Entertainment." I replied with my own letter, which included a pie chart drawn in dried manure, and the sentence, "Percent chance I care, 0%. She responded by calling animal control. They showed up, took one look at Darlene standing on a picnic table wearing sunglasses, and said, "Looks like everyone's fine here." I offered them goat cheese. They took seconds. But things got dark after the laughter. 3 days later, I went to feed the herd and noticed the cows were too short. Now, unless Bessie and Louise developed a taste for hitchhiking, this wasn't a casual stroll situation. I asked Cheryl, purely for the record, if she'd seen them. She blinked, gave me a smile sweet enough to rot teeth, and said, "Oh dear, perhaps they..." wandered off. Cows can be so unpredictable, ma'am. They weigh 2,000 pounds and move slower than dial-up internet. They don't ghost people like your second husband. I searched every acre of my land, no tracks, no gates left open. It wasn't until I checked my camera feed that I spotted something suspicious. Around 2 a.m., a white SUV with no plates paused near the rear pasture. 2 silhouettes got out, fiddled with the gate, and drove off 20 minutes later. One of them walked like they were wearing heels. Cheryl had alibis, of course. I was hosting a meditation brunch, she said, like those words belong together. That's when I realized this wasn't about cows. It wasn't about mimosas, parties, or whether my goats were wearing too much blush. This was about control, conquest. Cheryl was playing HOA Monopoly, and I was just another rancher in the way of her empire of beige perfection. She didn't want harmony. She wanted silence. Specifically, the kind that happens when the last independent homeowner gives up and sells out. And suddenly, I was next in line. So I did what any sane person would do. I turned my lawnmower into a weapon of psychological warfare. Every evening at 5:00 sharp, I cranked that rusty beast and rode the fence line in slow motion, shirtless in a cowboy hat, blasting opera from a speaker duct taped to the hood. Cheryl started setting out citronella candles like she was trying to summon HOA spirits to make me disappear, and every time, I just tipped my hat and gave her a nod that said, "Game on." But inside, I was steaming. Losing those cows felt like someone slashing a family photo, and I knew if I didn't take this seriously, my barn, my land, and my sanity might be next. This wasn't a spat between neighbors anymore. This was HOA trench warfare, manure, missing livestock, and the slow erosion of peace under pastel tyranny. If you've ever dealt with a neighbor who smiles while flipping your world upside down, you know the type. So stick around, because it only gets wilder from here. And trust me, Cheryl's next move makes goat rodeos look like Sunday school. Watch till the end so you don't miss the lesson this manure war teaches, and tell me in the comments, you ever had a neighbor so fake polite they'd smile while stealing your mailbox? When 4 code inspectors show up with matching clipboards, khakis, and the same nervous cough, you know someone's compensating for a power complex the size of a waffle iron. They came in a cluster like judgmental ducks, waddling through my pasture as if they'd been trained by a Disney villain's legal department. First guy flagged excessive natural odors. Second one said my barn radio violated noise limits because it played Johnny Cash at 4 p.m. sharp. The third looked at my scarecrow, which was flipping the bird, and asked if it was emotionally appropriate for neighborhood cohesion. I told him it was educational. Sometimes the kids need visual metaphors. I served them fresh lemonade with extra pulp and sarcasm, handed out a pamphlet I designed myself called "So You've Been Used by an HOA Queenpin," and told them they were welcome to inspect anything they liked as long as they didn't step in anything warm and recent. One of them asked where my goat rodeo permit was. I told him, "Same place as your sense of humor." They did not laugh. 3 days later, another envelope landed in my mailbox, dipped in HOA perfume and printed on that smug cream-colored cardstock only tyrants and wedding planners use. "Notice of encroachment," it read. According to Cheryl's hired surveyor, who apparently used a ruler from a cereal box, My wooden fence, which had been in that spot since Jimmy Carter had a job, was allegedly 19 inches over her HOA's new extended jurisdiction line. The letter demanded that I remove the fence, pay $4,200.00 in relocation fines, and rebuild it in community-centered white vinyl. I laughed so hard I had to ice my own rib. 19 inches. That's less than the width of Cheryl's ego, but apparently more dangerous than a sinkhole. She wanted me to tear down 100 feet of solid wood fencing because, as she put it, it creates a visual barrier that offends the neighborhood aesthetic. Lady, your entire HOA is a visual offense. My fence is the only thing keeping your nonsense from spilling onto my soul. But what burned me more than the vinyl demand was the gall. My grandfather built that fence. He didn't do it to match decor. He did it to keep coyotes out and freedom in. Replacing it with plastic felt like burying history under a tarp labeled "Live, Laugh, Leave Me Alone." And Cheryl's logic? That her imaginary line now included 19 inches of my life? That was peak suburban colonization, so I walked the line, literally. Tape measure in one hand, rage in the other. Measured from every angle. Then I pulled out the original survey deed, signed, notarized, and older than Cheryl's collagen. My property was solid. I even found an old photo in a dusty album showing the fence right where it sits now, with my grandfather leaning on it and flipping a bird that wasn't made of straw. Still, Cheryl filed a formal complaint. I had to show up at a mediation meeting with 2 HOA board members, a paralegal who looked like he was born inside a spreadsheet, and Cheryl herself, wearing a blazer so tight it was legally obligated to lie. "Mr. Tiller, we are simply trying to preserve harmony," she said while holding a diagram that made my property look like an invader in its own land. I calmly unrolled my deed copy, set it on the table, and said, "Ma'am, this fence has been here longer than you've been legally blonde." Her left eye twitched. The paralegal blinked like he was buffering, and one board member excused himself to use the restroom and never came back. The final straw? Cheryl tried to sweet-talk me after the meeting. "Mr. Tiller, you could just move it and save us all trouble." I told her, "Ma'am, I used to level casinos with dynamite and a Diet Coke. I don't move for passive aggression wrapped in cardigans." That's when it hit me. This wasn't a campaign about boundaries or vinyl. This was strategic erosion. One inspection, one pink slip, one fake inch at a time. Cheryl was trying to tire me out before the real fight began. And if you think this part was nuts, wait till you see what she does with a wolf. Who do you trust less? HOA inspectors with matching clipboards or expired coupon clippers at the self-checkout line? One minute you're brushing hay off your jeans, minding your own barn, and the next, your public enemy one-on a Facebook group called Saving Pecan Hill. Cheryl had clearly spent an afternoon deep diving into petty because suddenly my face was plastered on flyers with the headline, "Warning, Explosive Personality Alert." Below it, a picture of me mid-bite at the county fair, covered in barbecue sauce and holding a half-eaten rib. That's not a mugshot. That's a proud American moment. I found one of the flyers taped to the gas pump. Another was on the church bulletin board right between youth choir sign-up and lost cat. Answers to Chairman Meow. Her caption said I had unstable demolition experience and was increasingly erratic toward neighbors. The only thing unstable around here was Cheryl's grasp on reality, and maybe her third facelift. My so-called erratic behavior, playing Johnny Cash and letting goats do yoga in the front pasture. So I did what any wrongly accused rancher with demolition credentials and a grudge would do. I started showing up everywhere Cheryl went. Bank? I was there, cashing checks and humming Ring of Fire. Bakery? I ordered 2 bear claws and smiled like a man who knows where the HOA skeletons are buried. She flinched like I was going to pull out a lasso and wrangle her bylaws straight into a bonfire. But I didn't confront her. That would be too easy. Instead, I just existed, loudly, legally, and right in her line of sight. Let me tell you, watching Cheryl panic in the parking lot of a farmer's market was better than therapy and half the price. She started looking over her shoulder like I was Batman and she'd skipped jury duty. Then came the twist that made everything snap into place. Tom, my neighbor and honorary HOA resistance historian, sat me down with a folder full of notes and whispers from the past 3 years. Cheryl had done this exact thing to 6 other families. One moved to Alaska. Another faked a divorce just to get the wife's name off the deed. That woman now lives 2 towns over with a new boyfriend and a bumper sticker that says, HOA means hell over America. I started marking a map with red pins, each one a victim of Cheryl's reign. All 6 had something in common, property that bordered or overlooked Cheryl's backyard oasis. That's when it hit me. This wasn't random. It was chess, and Cheryl was playing for the Queen's throne, her concrete-lined swimming pool. Everyone she'd driven out had a line of sight to her backyard shrine, and I was the last dot on her bingo card. But here's where she messed up. I'm not a retired librarian or a nervous accountant. I'm a demo guy. My life was blowing up casinos in Las Vegas without turning it into a lawsuit. You think I'm scared of Cheryl's flyers and passive-aggressive brunches? Please. I once ran a backhoe through a mafia-owned parking lot because someone misread a blueprint. Cheryl was just another overconfident client who thought rules only applied to other people. Still, I knew this had escalated. This wasn't about fence lines or goats anymore. This was warfare, HOA style. She'd gone full-blown propaganda minister, and I was her designated villain. But I wasn't going anywhere. Not when I had proof, red pins, and every receipt she'd handed me with her fake smile threats. And now, well, Cheryl had no idea what kind of man she'd just tried to exile, because I don't run, I rebuild, and when I rebuild, I make it loud. What would you do if someone made you the villain of the HOA newsletter? Wear it like a badge of honor, or mail them a glitter bomb? Drop your best clapback in the comments, because next, Cheryl trades flyers for fur. And it gets wild. Literally. I've seen some wild things on this ranch. Goats tap dancing on my roof, cows escaping during karaoke night, but nothing quite prepares you for walking into your barn at dawn and locking eyes with a full-grown wolf. And not a metaphorical one like Cheryl in yoga pants with a clipboard. A real teeth-bearing, soul-freezing, bad-news-on-pause wolf. It stood over Sugar Boots, my youngest mare, who was already gone. Thunder, bless his stubborn hooves, had bite marks on his flank, but looked like he'd gone 12 rounds with a werewolf and didn't lose on points. The fence had been clean cut. Not chewed, not rusted, not accidentally collapsed. It was sliced, like someone had taken wire cutters and an evil mood out for a stroll. Sheriff comes out, chewing gum like it owed him money, and says, "Could wandered in from the wild." I said, "Sheriff, we ain't had wild wolves here since cassette tapes were relevant. You think a lone wolf just took a wrong turn off the interstate?" He scratched his head and muttered something about checking wildlife records. I wasn't buying it. I may not be a forensic expert, but I know sabotage when it howls. See, wolves don't pick locks. They don't stroll through the exact gap between 2 stalls like they've studied a blueprint. This wasn't nature. This was Cheryl. Or someone she paid with HOA hush money and a coupon for free decorative mulch. Sugar Boots was gone. Thunder was shaken, and I was livid. That horse was a family gift, and she died scared because someone couldn't stand a barn blocking their sunset. 3 days later, Cheryl strutted up to my fence wearing a lemon-yellow power suit and holding an iced coffee like it was a wand of social domination. "You look tired," she said, voice dripping with faux concern. "Maybe this place is getting to you. Have you ever thought about a townhouse?" "Ma'am, unless it comes with a moat and a mounted cannon, I'll pass." I stared at her the way a bull stares at a rodeo clown, annoyed, unimpressed, and calculating impact velocity. "Ma'am, you're about as subtle as a clown car at a funeral," I said. Her smile twitched like a Botox regret. "I'm just trying to help," she purred. "Sometimes people need a nudge." I gave her a nod. Just not with my neck. My spine handled that on instinct. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was scared, because I was planning. I dusted off the toolbox I hadn't opened since my demolition days. Inside was the heavy stuff. The drills, the permits, the blueprints, the forgotten rage. One tool, though, gleamed under the lamplight like it'd been waiting. My concrete calculation notebook. In demolition, we called it the Book of Finality. Engineers called it overkill. I called it hope. SC Cheryl made one critical mistake. She thought I was a grumpy farmer, but I'm a retired structural artist of destruction. She came for my land, then my livestock. What she didn't count on was what happens when you push a man who knows how to level a casino with nothing but patience and Portland mix. That night, I drew up a plan that started with silence and ended with a very loud thunk. You see, Cheryl had a pride and joy pool, the HOA shrine, center of her empire. That glittery blue rectangle was her social throne, and it just so happened to sit on legally questionable ground, untouched by inspections, fueled by ego, and perfect for my revenge recipe. What's worse, a wolf in your barn or a Karen in your driveway with a Starbucks and a zoning complaint. Let me know because the next part, let's just say it includes permits, concrete, and karma. Don't go anywhere. You're going to want to see how Cheryl's pool turns into a legend and why you should never underestimate a man with nothing left to lose and a license to pour. If you ever find yourself dealing with deep betrayal, gut-wrenching grief, and a HOA president with the personality of a fax machine, might I recommend therapy in the form of 40,000 pounds of quickset concrete? It's not covered by insurance, but it will leave you emotionally cured and your enemy spiritually flatlined. Cheryl loved that pool more than most people love their children. She bragged about its custom-tiled dolphin doing downward dog and claimed the LED lights had mood-shifting properties. Girl, please, that pool was a suburban shrine to passive aggression and vanity. I wasn't just going to take her down, I was going to make her famous. I forged the cleanest, crispest environmental remediation orders this side of Washington. They looked so official, even I almost believed them. I listed the source of the contamination as unregulated chemical runoff from narcissistic landscape structures. Then I called up some old buddies from my demolition days and asked how many concrete trucks it would take to make karma visible from space. 10, said Ben Morrison, but I'm not asking why. Saturday, 8:30 a.m. My ranch was quiet, but Willow Ridge was about to learn what rural justice sounds like in reverse. The trucks pulled up like a battalion of cement angels, horns humming, engines purring, ready to perform a spiritual baptism in gray sludge. I stood at Cheryl's gate in a vest, hard hat, and the biggest clipboard I could find. One neighbor came out in a bathrobe and asked, "Y'all filming a reality show?" I just smiled and pointed to the forged permit that read, "Emergency Neutralization, Category 4, HOA Contamination." Truck 1 rolled back, chute extended. A glorious wave of wet, gray finality oozed into that dolphin-decorated tomb-like frosting filling a bunt pan. I nearly cried. The pool gurgled like it knew it was dying, burping out the last of Cheryl's lavender-chlorine blend like it had regrets. By truck 3, the dolphin statue looked less like it was meditating and more like it was begging for a lifeguard. How I had eyes on the clock. I knew Cheryl would return from her weekly spa appointment at exactly 10:05 a.m. Face tight, eyebrows sharper than her morals. So by 9:45, I was on truck 7, directing the pour like Michelangelo with a mixer hose. Her yard looked like a fondue fountain from hell. Somewhere around truck 8, one of the HOA loyalists waddled over in cargo shorts and hissed, "Does Cheryl know?" I handed him a clipboard, a granola bar, and told him to hydrate. 10 o'clock IEME, the pool is now a slab, beautiful, level, solid enough to land a helicopter on. I wiped my brow with my hard hat just as Cheryl's white Lexus screeched into the driveway like it was auditioning for NASCAR. She stumbled out, saw the trucks, and unleashed a sound that can only be described as opera meets smoke alarm. "What the actual hell is happening to my pool?" she shrieked, slipping on her own emotional residue. Her face turned shades of red normally reserved for cherries and felony mugshots. "Ma'am," I said calmly, "we received an emergency environmental complaint. The pool was found to be a toxic site for community values." She tried to snatch the clipboard, but I held it like it contained launch codes. "This is fake," she wailed, pointing at the concrete still slopping out like thick gravy. "This is illegal. You can't just pour cement into someone's pool." I nodded and replied, "Ma'am, we can't allow contaminants to spread." She stood frozen, surrounded by curious neighbors filming everything on their phones, her dolphin statue now barely visible above the concrete sea. Her kingdom was buried. And I was just getting started. Ever felt justice flow, one concrete mixer at a time? Drop your favorite HOA horror story below and tell me, how would you have handled Cheryl's dolphin shrine? Stick around, the cement hasn't dried yet. What happens next might just put Cheryl on a list she can't get off, especially when the sheriff starts sniffing around. You know you've won when the local sheriff shows up smiling and the HOA board looks like they're sitting on whoopee cushions full of subpoenas. Cheryl threatened to burn my barn down, out loud, in front of witnesses, while still holding her overpriced handbag like it had legal immunity. Tom, bless his paperwork-loving heart, filed that terroristic threat report faster than you can say, "Ma'am, step away from the fence." Within hours, we had 2 deputies, a state investigator, and a federal agent who looked like he'd rather be fishing but was more than happy to crack open the HOA nut jar. Turns out, the torch parade Cheryl was planning wasn't her first rodeo. Investigators dug into her records like raccoons in a buffet dumpster. First came the wolf receipt. Yup. Purchased from a Wyoming exotic pet dealer, shipped express. "Not native wildlife," said the sheriff, "but it sure is native to felony charges." Then they linked her HOA beautification funds to a suspicious trail of payments to pest control, fencing contractors, and a guy named Donnie who once lit a shed on fire for fun. Her phone logs, spicier than a jalapeno in divorce court. She'd been calling former arson suspects, threatening uncooperative homeowners, and gossiping to her yoga group about finally cleansing the neighborhood of rural filth. Real charming stuff, Cheryl. One inspector found a notebook in her house with detailed plans titled Property Realignment Strategy, which I guess is HOA speak for how to steal land while wearing pearls. The cover was bedazzled, so were the felony counts stacking up. But the twist that made angels sing? She got cuffed in the middle of hot yoga, mid-pose, holding an oat milk smoothie like it was her baby. "This is a mistake," she barked at the arresting officer. "I'm the victim here." The officer calmly replied, "Ma'am, please put down the beverage and step into the reality of consequences." She screamed something about a deep state HOA conspiracy as they walked her past a mirror. I assume that's when the horror set in. Seeing herself not as queen of the cul-de-sac, but as a cautionary tale with a green smoothie mustache, Aunt's hoosh was booked, everything crumbled faster than her taste in patio tile. Residents came forward. Turns out she'd tried to evict a guy for owning a garden gnome that mocked European traditions. Another woman said Cheryl made her repaint her house twice because the beige was aggressive. The HOA board disbanded faster than teenagers at a busted party. Cheryl's reign ended not with dignity, but with a yoga mat, a fraud charge, and a photo that went viral captioned "Namaste in jail." And just like that, Pecan Hill was free. No more clipboard patrols, no more jazz flute echoing across the lawns. Folks started smiling again. Even the mailman stopped wearing body armor. And my land? Still mine. My fence? Still 19 inches over and still nobody's business. Cheryl's pool, now a slab of justice, got turned into a community half-kept. The kids named it the Slayment. What would you name a basketball court built on top of a $500,000 0-cents pool of tears and HOA paperwork? Drop your funniest names in the comments and stick around for the last chapter because this story doesn't just end with concrete. It ends with a concrete lesson. They say karma moves slow, but sometimes it shows up with a basketball. A horse named Concrete, and a neighborhood full of people yelling, "We're free!" Cheryl's pool is now a half-coat. The dolphin statue that once performed underwater yoga now referees 3-on-3s with a stern concrete stare. One kid even spray-painted "technical foul" on its forehead. I didn't stop him. Frankly, it had it coming. The insurance money came through faster than Cheryl's exit from yoga jail. I rebuilt the barn with a vengeance. Bigger beams, industrial sprinklers, even Wi-Fi strong enough to stream horse documentaries. Thunder was gone, but his legacy lived on in a feisty young paint stallion I named Concrete. Why? Because he's firm, unbending, and kicks back if you try to box him in. Sound familiar? Tom won the HOA election in a landslide. His platform? 3 rules. Don't be annoying, mow your lawn, mind your business. Folks roared like he just legalized fireworks and backyard chickens. The bylaws got torched, figuratively, although someone did burn them literally in a smoker and served HOAR rubbed brisket at the Victory BPQ. 10 out of 10 flavor. The town changed. Neighbors waved again. Nobody measured your grass with a ruler or sent anonymous notes about your wind chimes being too aggressive. One lady installed a garden gnome army, another painted her mailbox like Elvis. Freedom smelled like burgers and forgiveness. Even the mailman smiled like his spine had finally unclenched. I installed one last sign. Right beneath the not-for-sale board, I added a little something extra. Concrete solutions available. HOA discounts apply. I haven't had any takers, but the message is loud and clear. My property is mine. My barn is back. And tyrants, they get slabs, not sympathy. The funniest part? Cheryl's name became suburban folklore. Parents warned their kids, "Eat your broccoli or Cheryl comes back." One neighbor built a scarecrow wearing pearls and yoga pants, named it Karenstein. The HOA board put up a plaque by the cement court, dedicated to the memory of HOA excess and the power of pushback. Pecan Hill is now a punchline, but in the best way. Our neighborhood newsletter's first headline after Cheryl's fall? From chlorine to concrete, a cautionary tale. And in the final paragraph, a PS, justice wears horseshoes and carries a clipboard of consequences. Some folks build fences to keep people out. I poured concrete, so control freaks have nowhere left to stand. What's the funniest or most satisfying way you've ever dealt with a neighborhood busybody? Share your sweet revenge stories below. We might just feature them next. Power doesn't make you untouchable, it makes you visible. Especially when your ego's flammable and your pool glows like a beacon for karma. Next time someone comes at you with bylaws and fake smiles, remember, concrete is forever. And poetic justice? Well, she's got better aim than Cheryl ever did. This story wasn't just about an HOA horror. It was about what happens when you push the wrong person too far, especially someone who knows what justice weighs in cubic yards. The main character never started the war, but he sure as hell finished it. He reminded us that the loudest person in the room isn't always the strongest. The one who outlasts, outwits, and outworks, that's who changes everything. If this story gave you a laugh, a lesson, or a little extra backbone, drop a comment below. Have you ever dealt with a Cheryl in your life? We want to hear your wild HOA or neighbor stories. Don't hold back. And hey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click that bell icon so you don't miss the next time justice rides in on horseback or concrete mixer. Around here, we don't just tell stories. We pour 'em thick, serve 'em hot, and remind folks that sometimes the best fences are made of fireproof resolve. See y'all in the next one. And remember, karma's got a cement mixer now.